Hi, and welcome to Jung at Harp. Today we're going to talk about how to hold the ground of your own being. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer, a performer, and I also play the electric harp. And I'm here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a harp player and is also a Jungian analyst. So since we both play the harp, we call this Jung at Harp. So Kathleen, when we started talking about what we wanted to talk about today, I brought up three subjects, and one was perfectionism, which I and so many of my students and so many of the people I know deal with. A sense of groundedness, how to get groundedness, not by rooting down like a tree, but by having your own sense of gravitation so that you're not satellite rounding around everybody else. And then how we can sort of manifest the truth of who we are when we haven't even been able to see that truth yet.
Yeah. Well, what comes up for me when you say that is it all really starts with connecting with the center point deep within oneself, where there is like this little bitty spark of light that is the essence of who we are, that we were born with. I like thinking about it as the divine spark that we are. Some traditions talk about that as the soul. In Jungian analysis, in Jung psychology, he often referred to it as the self with a capital S, meaning the totality of our psyche, as opposed to our little s self or ego, and our sense of who we are in our consciousness. So I think to hold the ground of our being, and definitely to be to spin according to your own laws instead of the laws around you, or to put it in musical terms, to play the music from within your heart versus playing the music the way someone else wrote it. Then it begins by having a connection to that deep center point within, which really is the essence of who we are. And so for me, the first thing we have to do is we have to begin to pull all of our energy inside, out of all of the outer activities, the outer expectations, the outer shoulds, musts, and ought tos we get in relationship, and really to collect all of that and hold it inside of us. Because so often, if our energy and focus is out there on all those things, we don't know what's in us. There's no way we can see it,
So one of the things I'm thinking about is that right now I'm in the middle of giving a class called One Song, The Nightingale. And this is different than many of my classes. In many of my classes, I'm in the middle of creating this class. And in many of my classes, I'm teaching a concept, like I'm teaching how to play the blues, or how to create a 5-part arrangement form, how to improvise on a vamp. But in this one, I'm teaching how to play a song that I wrote that has a specific arrangement, but I'm basically decomposing it or distilling it to its simplest form without all the different ways that I've arranged it. I'm teaching it to people, like in the simplest way, so that they can then expand it to their abilities and in the way that they express. So as you say this, and so I immediately started thinking about, when you started going in, I was like, how can I distill, and what am I distilling? Because when I'm talking about music, I'm distilling a form, taking away all the extraneous, everything that could be done in a different way, and just getting down to the, in this song, it's just a descending bass line and a melody. That's what makes the tune. Everything else grows out of that. So are you talking about, so I guess that's getting rid of all the things where you could make choices and getting down to the one thing that is the whole point of what makes you you. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, and I want to just elaborate, since you mentioned your song, The Nightingale, and part of the essence we have to distill things down to know what is our spark of light is we have to distill it down to our most basic of felt experiences in our body. and what our body sensations are and what our own emotions and affects are. You know, for me, the difference between an emotion and an affect is an emotion is kind of quick and fleeting. I mean, we can be talking and in 10 minutes, you know, I can have 5 different emotions come up. And affect is like the emotional tone that's the backdrop. You know, affects kind of linger. They're like the curtain behind us, or the, you know, what the blanket that surrounds us. And so what we have to distill these things down to, for instance, the outer shoulds, must, and ought tos, or our value of perfectionism, is we have to then distill those things down to what is it I'm really wanting that? What is it, if I take off the cloak, what is the desire that has a specific affect that I'm longing for? So for instance, perfectionism keeps us from knowing our excellence, you know? And so,
Can you say that again?
yes, perfectionism keeps us from knowing our excellence. So the longing, the affective desire behind perfectionism is actually to feel the value of what one's doing, one's excellence.
Wow, but we don't, I'm thinking about myself, and also students in my academy
Mm-hmm.
often don't know how to feel that value. We've had it imposed, we've had it shown to us. This is good playing, this is good singing, versus that moment when I'm alone with the music that I'm playing. And especially as a composer, when I'm trying to find that one thing that touches me, or that brings out my tears or my joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that's me, that's my value.
Right.
Versus, so how, okay, so I can find it, but it takes a long time. It's not like you can say, oh, oh, here's this piece of music, I can achieve it and I can play it. Finding that value for me has to do with playing something over and over and getting deeper and deeper into it. And it might just be one measure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that there are different ways that we make something ours, or we find where we resonate with it. You know, 3 or 4 years ago, I decided that I was only going to learn harp tunes that after listening to them over and over, I started hearing in my head spontaneously. And that's now how I decide what harp tunes I'm going to learn, is that, you know, I listen to CDs, and not just of harp music, but of other music. And if there's something that all of a sudden I'm walking or I'm driving down the street, I hear going through my head, then I'll say, okay, what is that tune? Often I have to kind of hum it for my husband, and he tells me. And then I learn it because I know that there's something in me that it's already resonating with. So what you're talking about, if you start with a piece of sheet music, that how then do you work with that until something in you, it grows something in you, and that's something, it grows from within you, and so you then begin to hear it with different nuances and intonation and dynamics. And so then your own essence begins to inform it. So it's a very different orientation, because it begins from the ground of one's being within, versus up here with all these ideas of what it should be. And, oh, I learned that this is what that notation meant. You know.
Well, what I'm hearing, and what I really love it, is the question, how do you make this yours?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make this piece of music yours? How do you make this life yours? How do you make this person you are be you?
Right, right. Yeah. And it really does mean looking within and tracking those affects, because attached to the affects are always a longing. And so what you said in the beginning about value, and you didn't say it like this, but this is how I kept hearing it in my own mind, is how do we know the value of who we are and what we do? And I associate value with beauty. and value with an energetic quality, that it has aliveness. And we know our aliveness, we know the energetic qualities, the value based on what we are feeling in our body sensations and those affects. Very quickly, the way that psyche works is that the body sensations and affects will bring up an image, and then the image gives rise to a thought. So people spend a lot of time trying to change their thoughts, not realizing that it's the infrastructure underneath where the real power lies.
Now, I'm going to just go back to this experience of breaking down a song that I wrote for people, because as you're speaking and you're saying, you need to go into yourself, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to break that down. And I realized that in this class, I have people who've never played the song before, and I've had people who've been playing it from the sheet music for years and can execute it. And they're both saying something similar. And so the people who've played it for years and never knew how to break it down are saying, this is such a new experience. I'm like, I actually know how this tune works now. And now I can come into it at any moment, or I can make choices about it, or I can shift the key of it. I see how it works. And I'm realizing, and to me as a composer and the composer of the tune, I'm like, well, that was obvious. I mean, like, didn't you see the bass line? It was just like, if you ignore everything else, you just see this. And then I'm realizing I can't do that. I don't know what to ignore in my own life that might be embellishment. I don't know how to break that down. I can do it for music, but I don't know how to do it for my life.
Well, I think that the first thing you have to, in order to do it for your life, you have to develop the art of self-reflection, and you have to develop a capacity to track the whole of what's going on. What often happens where we get stuck is we only see one thing we're experiencing in the moment. So we get caught, for instance, we've talked at times about like binge eating. So in the moment, if you're only seeing what's in the moment, you're feeling the desire for the food. But if you can stop, breathe deeply and say, okay, but what's behind that? And what's behind that? And it's kind of like continuing to enlarge the viewpoint. Or the other image is we continue to bring it closer into home. It's like, what's the deepest thing that's going on underneath that? So the second thing we have to do after we develop and cultivate self-reflection is we have to develop an attitude of there's something more here than what I'm seeing. And let me ask myself, what's behind that? And some things we can do as we ask ourselves is we can know, what are we feeling? What are our body sensations? What other emotions are going on? What memories come up? What images? Because those things are like the crumbs on the trail.
Right. Well, it's so funny. I'm thinking a whole bunch of things are going through my head. One is that I was talking to a friend of mine the other night, and we were talking, I was saying, like, I'm not getting this done, and I'm just overwhelmed, and my desk is so messy. And there was something through the conversation that I kind of got to a point, and I realized, oh, this messy desk is actually an indication of the fact that I'm succeeding with many of the things that are very important to me. The important things that need to happen are happening. And this mess, which is the only thing I'm focusing on, is actually an indication of the success of that. But all I was doing was focusing on what was wrong here. And even seeing it is like, and that's why you didn't get everything done, because your desk is messy. So wait a minute, how did that come? Maybe that was on my mind. Another thing that I was thinking about when you were talking was, I totally get what you're saying. And I don't know how to do it. Like, as you were saying this, I was thinking, okay, what am I doing for my students in this class? I'm taking this thing that just looks like this amorphous thing that has lots of feelings, it's beautiful or whatever. And I'm pulling all of that aside to be able to show that root. But it's
Mhm.
taking the person who created it to do that, although I'm sure other composers could do it. And as you were talking, I was thinking, if only I had a worksheet. If only I had a worksheet for what Kathleen's saying, you know, a checklist, and I could like go in there, because I understand the principles that you're saying, and I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if you Google, there are various counseling modalities that will, and self-help that would have worksheets. But what I'm going to say is that, and this is part of how we work, is that our unconscious is unconscious, meaning it's unknown. So sometimes when we get to a place where we can't see ourselves and we need someone who can sit with us and see us, which is part of what happens in Jungian analysis, it sounds like maybe it's also part of what happened when you were talking with your friend about your messy desk and you were going on, and she or he was able to somehow mirror something to you and say, yeah, but I'm hearing you did this, this, and this. So they could see what in that moment remained unconscious or unknown to you.
Right.
And in their seeing it could respond to you in a way that you could see it. So the reality is sometimes it takes human relationship, because if we go to the worksheet, we've still got our unconscious.
Right. Right. I see what you're saying, that is a
Yeah.
conversation. And I remember when I was talking to him, it wasn't necessarily that he said, but don't you see, it's your blah, 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 blah. I mean,
Right.
he was just speaking. And I realized that happens in the class as well.
Yeah.
It's not like I came into the class and I'm like, okay, everybody, I know how to do this. It was like, it came out of me trying to show it, and then out of their questions and the things that they said, it came out of the conversation. It was that, oh, is that why people have therapists?
Yes, this is why people have therapists, and why people, why people go to Jungian analysis, why sometimes people go to dream groups and work their dreams with other people. It's why people go to 12-step programs. Is that part of the makeup of our psyche is we have all that's known and conscious, but then there's all that's unknown and unconscious. And we again can cultivate a largesse of self and our view that can help us learn how to better track and listen. Because the other thing I think that's really key here, and I probably say this every time we talk, is it really boils down to building a relationship to what's inside of us, not trying to control it, not trying to understand it, not trying to get to the root to it, but dancing with it. And so, if my perfectionism comes up, and a part of me can say, wow, there's my perfectionism, and God, it is just wiping out everything I've done today. And what is it you really are trying to point out to me? And I can dialogue with it, then something inside of me there might be a still little voice that, here comes a little something I hadn't thought about. And we do this all the time automatically. We're all the time engaging in inner dialogue.
Right.
All
And
the time.
a lot of the time it's very negative dialogue.
And a lot of the time it's very negative inner dialogue. So the mechanism that's most effective already exists in us. We just have to tune into it actively and invite something different. Invite.
Well, it sounds like I'm hearing you say that, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's like a radio. I don't know if people still have radios, and you can dial in the frequency, that there's something else happening here.
That's a beautiful analogy. It is kind of like we adjust the radio station. So I can keep listening by default to my inner critic and the slave driver who thinks perfectionism is possible and a high value. Or I can say, enough of that channel. Let me see what matters to my heart right now. What is it that I need to do before I go to bed to feel my sense of accomplishment? You know what? Maybe what I need to do is just write down everything I accomplished. I'm just going to write it all down so that I can say to that perfectionistic part of me, look at what got created today.
Yeah, or even like, good job.
Or good job, yeah.
And I'm thinking about, I mean, again, going back to music and what has to happen in order for that deepness to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually means taking just one part of it and really milking and luxuriating and sitting in that one part. And I'm doing this because I'm thinking I play it over and over and over, not to get it right, but to let it get to me.
Right.
Like I'm saying, what are you know, I'm open. What is this saying to me? What is this baseline saying? Where is the emotion there?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, and that is how I make it mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is if I was to take that as an analogy for finding my own sense of value, and I can't remember exactly the way you said it in the beginning, but I really loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Is to take one thing, and I guess I would do it through music because that's when I'm most with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm also hearing you say that there's a sense of being with.
Mm-hmm.
And we always have that sense that we're with this critic who's just like always there talking. And there's another with. We can keep creating withs.
Mm-hmm.
And I notice that when I'm playing my instrument, I am experiencing a with. And it's immediate because there's an immediate response from the instrument, especially this instrument, because it is I play it and that rings. It is continuing to sing. So that harmony continues to sing. And that is a witness that can then open up what I might experience, especially if I'm singing with it as well or speaking with it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that witness as it was resonating even still now in my gut, having felt that vibration, that what blocks people often from holding the ground of their own being and staying in their own gravitational field is they do not want to stay with the quote negative emotions, unquote. That we've all been trained somehow that we don't want to feel our sadness, we don't want to feel our grief, we don't want to feel our depression, we don't want to feel our anxiety. So we live in a culture that actually goes like, oh, just do something with it. Do. And the doing often furthers us from the very thing we need to be doing, which is resonating with it and saying, okay, what is the value of this in my life right now? And, I think often about pre-Christian Celtic spirituality, the good God, the Dagda, played the harp. And the Dagda played three airs: the airs of sleep, the airs of grief, and the airs of laughter. And so I think about that a lot, about kind of as three primary affective states, because I think sleep is not just literally physically sleeping, but I think it's kind of a relaxed state of consciousness.
And the time when other things happen. Like I know that's when my learning happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think if we just even looked at those three states, how often do we really say it's okay for me to feel my grief? That somehow it's as if we're not supposed to have it. But suppose if grief is my affective backdrop, so I'm grieving, I didn't actually get to go to Iona on a pilgrimage, so I led a teleconference pilgrimage of the heart, which was amazingly powerful. If I can just let that grief be a part of my field, I don't have to make it go away. I don't have to do anything with it. I can just say, yeah, it's part of my landscape today. And even though I feel that sadness, I'm going to go on and do this creative thing and bring presence and joy and open to what life can grow here. So I think often the doing is actually being able to tolerate that this is part of our feeling landscape. and moving with it instead of letting it consume us, and then nothing else can exist.
You know, the whole time you're talking, I am thinking about what I've learned from doing this event called Harp Time Live, where I've just been opening up to harpists all around the world, you know, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we meet, and I come up with a groove or an idea, we play it, and everybody plays it. And it's very simple, and we're playing the whole time. And I'm showing them, this is the bass, you know, I mean, I'm showing them stuff. And at the end, I'm always like expecting people to say, well, that was boring. We just did the same thing for the whole time. And that's never what they're saying. And they're saying things that are resonating with what I'm hearing you say, which is, oh, I get it. It's the rhythm that moves things forward. It was so great to feel the rhythm throughout this. And then when we played the blues one day, they were saying, after we did it for 10 minutes, I began to really understand where it was going to come back to. So I knew that if I got lost, I could always start again here. And I'm hearing these things as, I don't know if the affect, or I don't know if it is, as a feeling state.
Yes.
The feeling state of experiencing the rhythm and being able to sit on it and trust it. Yes. The feeling state of knowing the form of something that's happening, so that you can trust that if you get lost, you can come back on, so that you can experience being lost in a completely different way, with sort of trust and curiosity.
That's right. That's right.
So
if we give,
yeah, go on. I'm trying to think, how can I actually move forward with this in my life by combining it with music?
Well, and I think again, it's a piece of it is, suppose the groove isn't any one feeling state of your life.
Right. So it might
that the groove of my life for the day is where I feel most grounded and centered, and that what's happening in my inner desire and my outer action are congruent.
So that might be a downbeat. You mean, like the time?
That might be the downbeat. Yeah, that the downbeat of my life, day in and day out, is what my heart's desire and affective state is in the moment, congruent with what I'm doing in the outer world.
So if we could have that as a rhythm that we keep connecting with, because I do say to everyone, all that matters is that what you do on the downbeat. I mean, if you're lost, if you're just getting started, just get that downbeat. And if you can't even get the downbeat, get the first downbeat of a 4-measure phrase, and then another down, or the first of the 8. And I hear that's what you're saying. If we can get that groundedness, even if it's all over the place, and there's no rhythm, predictable rhythm to it at first, that is a place to start.
Absolutely. And again, it requires giving up a sense of control.
Right,
and,
of course.
Right.
That's right, because I'm always also saying to them, the notes are not the music. Once you start, the music is going, whether you're playing it or not.
That's right.
And so if you stop to try to get the right notes, you're not playing the music.
There you go. There you go. So if I'm moving with an intention throughout the day that my downbeat, my groove is going to be checking in periodically what's happening internally, and is that being matched in the outer world, and is there congruence? Then what we also have to do is let go of perfectionism and order as the ideal, and realize part of the process is messiness. So, and this moment,
well, I'm good at the messiness part, but
and this moment, where the congruence might be is, and we're laughing together about it. And 10 minutes from now, the congruence might be we're feeling sadness and tearing up about something, or we're feeling touched and tearing up. That there's a congruence between inner and outer that accompanies us regardless of the activity. People think the activity is what creates the ground of being and the gravity center that's going to hold you, but it isn't activity. It's the felt state of congruence, of inner and outer, of oneness. Here's the ground of my being, and I'm moving through time and space and matter with that as the rudder.
I'm thinking, why are the blues so important? And I'm thinking of it in terms of how I teach it in my class, blues harp style. And I teach it by saying that there's 3 chords, but they're really a state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Each chord is like a state of being. And in trying to teach it to people, I actually came up with, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm not sure. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm not sure. I mean, that was actually the sequence, and we learn that. And I never really thought about the fact that, in fact, the blues, which is a very simple musical form,
Mm-hmm.
can be joyful. It can be mournful. It can be painful. It can be complaining. It can be, grateful. It can be all those things. And it can be all those things from one moment to the next in it.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, I just keep coming back to this because I keep thinking about how can I practice this using something I know,
Mm-hmm.
which is music.
Mm-hmm.
And then take that, and as I understand it there, then I can take it over to how do I feel? Because you're talking about being being congruent.
Yes.
That your actions being congruent with the weather inside, I guess, is that
right. That the actions being congruent with the weather, and the action that's congruent is how the qualitative atmosphere that one brings. So for instance, my good friend and musician and founder of the American Music System, Pam Wiley, says that she always tells kids that the blues are happy songs about sad things. You know, that the blues, everybody gets the groove and you smile and you're singing about these things. Usually the blues are about sad things. It's a way of bringing the larger being, the aliveness of who one is, that is what carries us through any situation, even when we're sad. So the blues are a beautiful example of how there is a congruence where we're holding on to the largesse of who we are, at the same time acknowledging the one weather forecast that's prominent at the time.
right?
You know, that again, it's always that we're always more than any one feeling or thought or affect that we're having at any given time. And if you're going to hold on to the ground of your own being, then you have to cultivate that attitude, that belief, and then a way of talking to yourself about what's going on that allows for that.
I'm so overwhelmed by musical analogies as we talk, because when we're creating music, there's 3 roles. There's the bass line, there's the bass, which you can see very clearly in a harp because it's down here, and then there's the accompaniment, which is in the middle, and then there's a melody up here. And I'm just thinking about that in the blues. The bass line is predictable. There's a lot of variation, a huge amount of variation in it, but there is, and then there's, and as I change harmonies, I feel like that's the change of the affect, with still the bass line, which gives me that beat or that connection. But then this that's like what I'm doing. Like the melody is what I'm doing. This bass line is me connecting, and then this is kind of the atmosphere. And like this is sort of a meditative blues, but there's so many different, I mean, there's blues that would sound like this. It's still a blues, and it still has all those aspects of it. The connecting to the bass line, the middle portion where you really hear the harmony, and then this which is kind of, again, my actions. I'm just so taken by that.
Yeah. Yeah, so what's really resonating for you is that if we're going to live out of the ground of our being, we have to realize that there's a ground that holds, that's like the bass line that holds. And then there's this other stuff, the melody, perhaps the
it could
emotion.
Be always different, yeah.
That's right. And then the accompaniment that we might throw in, but that there is always this bass line, and that ground of being, like the bass line, can vary. It's not just, but there's a solidness to it, you know?
Yeah, and that connection, that moment of congruence, of connection, just going in, going down at all those points, even when it's not there.
Right.
Like if I'm playing it, like I left it completely out, but it was still there. Right. I'm feeling it there, and the more that I play, the more that, oh, I see. Okay, I get it. When I'm learning it, I need to put it in very consciously. Right. For example, if I'm learning how to live my life as the blues, or live my life and connecting, I might need to put a timer on every 15 minutes and say, connect, baseline moment, downbeat moment, connect. And I might have to do that over time until I start actually internalizing it. Once I've internalized it, it's going on whether I'm consciously trying to do it or not.
That's right. It's like when we've talked about with the strings of passions, having practices.
Yes.
And having a practice that you do every day. If you spent 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the middle of the day, and 10 minutes in the evening, lying down, focusing on your breath, and then just starting at your feet and working your way up and just seeing what's going on in your body, you would be developing this muscle that is necessary for finding the ground of your own being. And then in the middle of the morning, when you start to feel overwhelmed or the perfectionist kicks in, that muscle will be there working, and you'll say, oh, when I say that to myself, my stomach turns. Or, ooh, when I say that to myself, I just felt a block. And then we can begin to see how our attitudes and how the things that we say affect the ground of our being, and whether it facilitates us moving from that or it blocks it. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is put in 3 downbeats, 3 conscious downbeats, moments when you're connecting all the way deep into the music of who you are.
Yeah.
And then, like with music, when you get lost, that's when you put another one in.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And the most fundamental of exercises, how to do that, is to just put your attention on your breath and do a body scan.
Right. So I'm hearing that actually I'm going to correct what I just said. When I put in, when you get lost, put in another downbeat, I'm going to say no. When you get lost during the day, listen.
It is listening, and it's listening within.
Right. Yeah. So that's how we listen within, is you're saying connect. It sounds like you're also saying connect to the instrument, the body, in those moments. So in the meditation, in the downbeats of the meditation, we're just connecting. We're just letting it get to us.
Yes.
And then when we get lost, we stop and we listen with a body scan.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
And
there's my checklist. Thank you.
okay, you're very welcome. I'm glad Psyche graced us with it. Yeah, but because what this whole culture and mentality of what do I do with it is actually counterproductive. It keeps us from doing the one thing which is really needed, which is stopping, connecting with the breath, and listening to what's going on in one's own body mind.
When you say we're thinking what to do with it, meaning like, how do I fix this, or what, this just
Yeah,
came up, I need to deal with it. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Having that connection first. So before you play, listen.
Listen, absolutely. And again, it's what repeatedly over and over, musicians say is if you know the song and you can hear it in you before you start learning it, it's a much different process than if you are learning cold from sheet music, because there's something already inside to guide you. If you don't know it, what do composers do? They hear the music inside, then they write it down or they find it on the instrument. It starts within. And so, how do we make our life our own? And how are we the composer of our own life? It's the same thing. We listen for the music within, which comes up through our body sensations and the longings and affects that arise with those.
I'm thinking about my own process, which is
Mm-hmm.
to have a feeling or an impulse and then go and look for it. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a composer that has it all and then I just put it on the instrument. So I go look for it. And I think that what I'm hearing and what you're saying is the looking for it is looking for the feelings that I'm having with the things I'm doing.
Well, in that case, what I'm hearing is you have an impulse, and then you use the harp to help you find what the resonance of that impulse is.
Right. Okay. Yes. And I know how to do it with music. Right. And so
Yeah, but
exactly
yeah,
how to do it with life.
the same thing. It's where's the resonance in you? What is the outer world project or the outer world action or the outer world conversation that resonates with the impulse you're having?
This is fascinating. I feel like I'm in virgin territory of my mind. And one of the things that I love, that I'm so grateful for, is because I haven't taught all my life. I've really just created this academy in the last, 5-10 years. The things that students say to me
Mm-hmm.
about their journey, and especially when they're lost or stuck, is coming to me now as in a helpful way on my own journey of like, how do I play this instrument,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and going back and listening to what you're saying, and then putting it together with what they've said, is something that I really want to do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think for you, the key to how you compose is the resonance,
The
you know,
emotional yeah,
the emotional
yeah,
resonance. Yeah.
that's right. I'm searching for what are the words that say this, and what is the music that makes those words more meaningful,
Hmm.
that releases their inner meaning.
Yeah. And if we apply it to our life for a minute, so, this morning I got up and I did my power walk because sitting and doing meditation or writing this morning wasn't going to fit the resonance. It wasn't going to resonate with the energy that I had in my body. But what was going to resonate with the energy in my body was to go ahead and do my power walk. So that's a simple example. Sometimes what resonates for me is I want to pull the weeds out of my flower beds. Other times I have no interest. It doesn't resonate. So those are just very basic examples of what we're talking about. It's like finding, just like with the composing, are my learning tunes that now are going through my head automatically because there's something in it speaking to me. That's it. What is it inside of me that's speaking to me, and where in the outer world might be a behavior or activity or interaction that mirrors it, that resonates with it. It's like tuning forks. You know, the inner tuning fork and the outer tuning fork.
Right,
The inner
right,
tuning
right.
fork, yeah.
I keep coming back to the blues because I just keep thinking that it's such a simple form that you don't have to think about once you know it, and so many different variations on it of emotion. I just keep thinking like, wow, that could also be a meditation for me, and a
Mm-hmm.
way for me to find and resonate and connect and harmonize with what, like you're saying, there's a different energy from meditating than going on a power walk, than pulling weeds. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, well, there's a minor meditative blues, and there's a
Yeah.
blues, and there's this tempo, and there's that tempo. And I was like, wow, I could be going back to this same place
Yes.
to get something completely different connection, and not have to be like, well, let's see, what piece am I going to play? But literally have like, 3 or 6 different options for exploring what's going on for me, and helping me bring it into view for myself,
Yes.
and looking for those same feelings in what I'm doing in other parts of my life.
Yes. Yes. That's a beautiful connection there. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I feel like I got so much out of this. I mean, what are your takeaways from the day?
You know what I'm thinking is most important is that the resonance that we're talking about is it's a kind of a feeling, energetic state that we want to know what's inside of us so that we can find the match in the outer world. And I think that, again, whether we put on rock and roll to listen to, or old Beatles music, or meditative harp music, or the blues, it usually is what's resonating with what's inside of us in the moment. So this whole idea of resonance and the match, I think, is a wonderful musical analogy. And the resonance internally is always a felt state that includes body sensation and emotion or affect. It is not what's going on in the head and the thinking function. That often gets in the way of us finding what the resonance is. So that's my takeaway. And yeah.
And my takeaways are continuing to cascade, that bring us back to something we've talked about kind of a little bit over and over again, which is how we can use music as a therapeutic aid for ourselves. And by therapeutic aid, I mean not in the place of therapy or anything else, but as a way to help us get connected to what's going on with us, so that we're not hiding it and obfuscating it, but that we're actually expressing it and connecting with it. And I think this brings us back to that downbeat and the question in the beginning of finding your own value, meaning actually being able to connect to whatever value. And by value, I don't mean money value, but like a color value, or
yes.
to connect with that. And we can actually do that through playing music in a certain way, not through executing it, not through getting it perfect, but through having pieces we can go to that are opening up for us, opening the world up for us.
Yes.
And for when one of those is blues and another is being able to distill a piece like in the Nightingale, so that you can let it bloom over and over and over again as you're feeling.
Yes.
Wow. And then that says to me, so Deborah, you have had all this in your hands. You have had this. We all have this, whether we have an instrument or either literally if we have our hands that we can play. And what a rich, I mean, that's like opening your hands and being like, oh, look what I have.
Yes. Yeah. And the treasure trove of our being is with us all the time, 24/7. And every time,
If we know how to connect to it.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And completely inaccessible if we don't.
Right.
Combination lock. we've forgotten.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, Kathleen, thank you again.
You're welcome.
I just, I keep going back to the moment in which I wanted to continue this conversation, which was in your car. And I remember that moment and just thinking, I really want to see where this conversation goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful to be getting to see that.
Yeah.
How long ago was that? Was that like 10 years ago, 5 years ago? I don't even know how long.
Gosh, it was probably at least 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a long time, but
that just goes to show that a conversation can be connected at any moment.
And that when there is a deep resonance with the ground of one's being, it doesn't go away. And so the resonance between you and I that started then didn't go away.
Right.
It stayed there until it found its way, as it's found its way now into our Jung at Harp conversations.
Well, thank you so much. And Kathleen, I look forward to our next conversation.
Terrific. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.